Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, the chief spiritual dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, but as I also like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And I think that mission is in part what is driving this conversation today. I'm very excited to be able to talk with a fabulous, very eclectic author, speaker, singer, healer, introduced to me by the goddess of awesomeness, Tara Gorman. But I'd like to thank you very much, Milagros Phillips, for taking the time today to have a conversation. Really appreciate it. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited about this podcast because this is the subject that's near and dear to my heart.
Oh my! Well, you know, we just met the other day, sort of virtually, and already I know so much about you and the many different things that you're into, and we'll have to talk about that because it's hard to summarize. I've watched your TED Talk. You're working on a TV show. You're speaker, singer, all these things. But just to start off, because I'm always fascinated, where did music come from in your life? Were you in a musical family? Did your parents play music? Did you start playing music early? Were you just singing? How did kind of music find its way into your soul and become a big part of who you are?
Well, my father was a violinist. Way before I was born, he played in an orchestra. I think it was like a dance band kind of thing in the Dominican Republic. And I also had a brother who was a violinist who sang solfeggio every single day.
He did what?
He loved classical music.
Oh.
We were going to say something?
No, I didn't quite hear what you said. He did what every day?
He sang solfeggio. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do.
Okay, I wasn't sure what you meant. Thanks for explaining.
So he sang solfeggio every day, and he also had an amazing operatic voice, a beautiful voice. My sister was an amazing singer. She was a seamstress, but she sang just for the sake of singing. She just loved singing. Beautiful, beautiful voice. And then we had a mom who thought she sang well, but
yeah, yep.
He had one of those pointy, squeaky, voices that we all used to kind of snicker at behind her back, kind of thing. It was really terrible when we were children. Anyway, music was always in my life. I had one sister. Most of my siblings have passed away because they were way older than myself. I have one brother left. I had 5 brothers. And everyone listened to different kinds of music. I had one brother who loved like country western music. I had one brother who listened to a lot of hymns and things like that. My father would listen to John Philip Sousa music,
I love that.
Yeah, and I grew up with all the classics, a lot of Mozart and Beethoven, and and just it was very, very eclectic. And of course, we had our Dominican music. So I grew up with merengue and what is now known as bachata, with salsa and all of those, which of course I love to dance all of those. But
yes.
But so I grew up with music. When I came to the U.S. and I was in junior high school, I joined the chorus, and then I became a soloist with that chorus, and then I joined the Manhattan Borough White Chorus, and so I was always singing. I was always, I went to Music and Art High School, and when I was in junior high school and applying for music and art, I sent in 2 applications, one for art and one for music, because I was interested in both. And they sent it back saying that I had to choose one.
Oh.
I cried for 3 days because I couldn't decide. And then I finally decided that, you know what, if I study art, I don't have to take theory tests.
That is a plus. Music theory is, something else.
So
I know.
For art.
Yeah.
I became a painter. And so, and have never regretted it. But after school, I was attending what was then called the American School of Music. And that was right around Rockefeller Plaza.
Nice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I had some amazing teachers at that point. I had some women who were, they were affiliated with the Metropolitan Opera. Because at that point, I was a carlatura, and I was studying opera at the time. Mm-hmm. And absolutely loved it. That was my big dream. I wanted to be an opera singer.
So did you then, after school, did you continue singing quite a bit, or in groups or opera or different things?
So no, when I was 16, I insisted that my parents sign this contract with this manager who ended up sexually harassing me.
Wow.
And I stopped singing.
No, really?
And I didn't sing for about 26 years.
Wow. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. I never told my parents. I went home, I tore up the contract, and then I was scared that my parents might get sued because I tore up the contract. I mean, I was just, I was a young person and very naive. And I didn't start singing again until a friend of mine, whom I just loved dearly, she was getting married, and she asked me to sing the Ave Maria at her wedding.
Oh, I love that. I had that song sang at my wedding, too. Ave Maria. It's so beautiful.
So did I. Yeah. And so I couldn't say no to my friend because she was precious to me. And so I sang, and then I started to sing again.
Nice. Great. So then what did you do? Did you start singing sort of around the house? Did you go out and find some operas to sing in?
I always sang around the house. I used to sing to the children all the time. In fact, I used to drive them crazy because I would play this game with them where they would say something and immediately I had a song for it because I had such a huge repertoire, Of course, growing up in the 60s and 70s, we all had access to all these great musicals. And so, there wasn't a musical I couldn't sing a song to, mm-hmm. And I knew all of them by heart at the time. And it used to make them crazy. And I remember one of them saying to me one day, "Is there a phrase that you don't have a song for?" I remember that game that was, I think it was a TV game where they would play, can you guess this song name? Yeah.
I remember that. They'd give you a couple of notes and you had to come up with the song.
Wow. Yes. I used to love that. So, so music has always been an important part of my life. Always an important part.
But then, of course, you sang around the house. Did you go out and start singing opera again? Or is that when you kind of got into, or I don't know if we want to talk about this right now, but it is one thing that I'm very interested in that I know that you have done is sort of healing, singing for healing purposes. I mean, healing is a lot of who you are and what you do. So the music has tied into that for you in some respects, I guess, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That was right around the time when I started discovering music. I had lost most of my range. So I was no longer a carlatura. I couldn't sing in the higher ranges that I could. But I started discovering this new way of using my voice. And so I started to do sound therapy, and pretty soon I was teaching it.
Oh, sound therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you describe that? What is sound therapy?
So for me, it was something that just kind of came naturally. I had friends who would come over because they had some kind of ailment or something, and I would have them sit, like straddled in a chair. So instead of sitting with your back against the back of the chair, you would sit with your belly on the back of the chair. So I had access to their spine, and I would sing up and down their spine, and they would immediately start to feel better. And I just thought, well, this is really hokey. This is weird and strange, but I kept doing it. And the more I did it, it seemed like the more powerful it became. I remember a friend of mine, and it was all intuitive, you know. So I had this friend who came over, and I told her, look, I just discovered this, and you know, God bless my friends. They were always willing to let me try stuff, right?
God bless friends. I hear you.
Yeah,
Yes.
truly. And I said, I don't even know what it is, but I sing to people and they seem to get better. And I just kept getting intuitively that I needed to sing. We call it singing someone, right? So I needed to sing her. And so, so she said, sure, that sounds great. And I started to sing up and down her spine. And when we were finished, she started moving her arm and just really like moving her shoulders. And then she started to raise her arm and put it back down and just kind of exercising her right arm and shoulder. And so I said, are you okay? And she goes, I'm fantastic. She said, for 2 years, I haven't been able to lift my arm.
Wow.
And I just thought to myself, okay, there's something to this, right? And at one point, I did a demonstration for Herb Benson. He's known as the father of integrative medicine at Harvard. And I did a demonstration for him and his staff, and they were so impressed with what happened very quickly with sound. And then soon after that, I signed up and became a volunteer at Deaconess Hospital in Massachusetts. This was in the 90s, the late 90s, and in their hospice department.
Yeah.
And I would sing to people as they were dying. And it was so powerful. It was amazing because it was like having access to that very sacred moment when someone leaves life. And I remember, you know, I would ask permission to come in and to sing. And I had like singing crystal bowls and singing Tibetan bowls and things like that I used to harmonize with. And I remember going into a room and there were these two women there. And I had asked permission to sing, and intuitively I felt like they know this song, right? And all of this was improvised, by the way. I had, you know, I just would listen to my intuition. That's one of the ways that I learned to really listen to my intuition. And I started singing a song that I had never heard, didn't know. I didn't have words to it, but I had the music. The sisters, the one that was in bed dying, and the other sister started crying. And then they both started singing with me. I was floored. And so
singing
now
a song that you didn't know.
That I didn't know.
Wow.
And so we, so the three of us were singing and crying. And it was such a powerful, powerful experience. It was just unbelievable. And then another time I was singing this patient and the staff started to come in because what was happening was that the sound was relieving the stress of not just the people who were dying or family members that were in the room, but also the staff because they were hearing it. And so some staff started to come in and there were about 5 members of staff that came in that particular day and made a semicircle around this patient. And we all were singing and harmonizing for this patient as they were dying. And I just got such an amazing feeling. And I thought to myself, wow, I wonder if we're sung into existence, right? If that is what happens. So then I started to study things like cymatics. I was given a wonderful book by this man from India called Nada Brahma, The World is Sound.
Yeah, I love that book. Yeah.
Yes.
Studying that now, trying to understand. Yes.
Yeah, powerful, powerful book. The Physics of Immortality. I mean, those are the kinds of books that I was reading because I was really trying to figure out how to heal myself.
Right.
And in the process, what I learned was that healing me is healing the world.
Yeah.
And so it was a really powerful time in my life. And I was doing the healing racism work at that time, but not, I wasn't doing it to the level that I'm doing it now, let's just say. But what I realized was how much I learned through that process of doing that work.
Can I ask a little bit about because
Sure.
I just find this really fascinating and making, 100% sense. So you were talking about early on, you'd sing up and down the spine of your friends,
Mm-hmm.
and you're sort of singing intuitively, and you're singing intuitively to the people in hospice. Could you perhaps describe that a little bit more, if you can, about what is that? Where does that come from? How do you know what to sing? I assume other people ought to be able to do that if they kind of know what to do. I mean, certainly mothers sing to children, lullabies and all that kind of thing. But could you explain a little bit more about maybe where you think it comes from, or how do you know what to sing? You just sing, or anything else about that?
I think for me, a lot of that, how they say we teach what we need to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the lesson wasn't so much in the music itself. For me, the lesson was in learning to trust my own intuition. That's really what I learned. And so it's that gut feel, or that neutral feel in the body, as opposed to, say, an intense feeling in the body, and intensely negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then there are levels of that, right? And then there's neutral, and then there are levels of feeling good, right, or feeling comfortable, and to the point where you become joyous or blissful, or any of those things. So there's this huge range, right? So there's part of that, but also there's a listening, right? So I'm willing to be still and be quiet, so that I become the instrument through which the music is played. So at no point do I own the music. What I own is the instrument. And I allow my intuition to give me information as to the notes that need to be played for that particular person. And so, I don't really have a way of explaining that, except to realize, eventually I came to realize that was a gift for me to learn to trust my intuition. Because, for instance, in 2006 or something like that, 2007, I started a women's band, and we were an improv band. So we rarely had music. There were 5 of us.
It was a cappella, you mean?
No, no. We had a flautist.
Okay.
We had someone who played banjo and guitar. I sang and played drum. We had a couple more drummers, and we all played a variety of instruments. And everything we recorded, we recorded 1 CD, and everything we recorded was improvised. We went into the studio thinking we were going to do a demo, and we ended up recording a full CD with 9 songs on it.
Wow, they were all improvised.
They were all improvised.
With singing, lyrics, and
some were singing with lyrics. In one of them, I sing in Spanish. We did an Indian piece called India's Sunrise. We did I did one piece with a friend of mine who is a Native American woman, and we did a piece called Waban, which is the wind. But she and I also recorded a piece with whales, um, dolphins, and the sound of the breath.
I want to check some of this out. I want to check where do you find this?
I've got to get that CD. It was out for a while, but we never reproduced it. But I do have one, so I'll make sure that I get one to you.
Yeah, I think people would like to hear that. So,
Yeah.
I also think you mentioned in the TED Talk silence, the importance of silence. So I'm thinking that when you're going into a singing situation, that you're kind of in silence and listening to what it is, the music that's going to come through your instrument self.
Right. But, here again, it was preparation for the work that I do today.
Yeah.
So when I do my seminars, my race healing seminars, I'm really quiet. Like I say a lot, because I'm giving people information and history and all kinds of things. But inside, I'm very quiet because I want to hear the audience at more than one level. So, for instance, we now know through research that the human heart puts out an electromagnetic field that goes, between 3 and 15 feet beyond the body. So I'm in communication with all those fields in that room, in that space. Mm-hmm. And their field is in communication with me. So I need to be able to listen to what they're saying, but I also need to be able to listen to their fears. And I need to be able to listen for where people go into denial, or when they're having trouble understanding something, so that even when they don't ask, I can still give them the information. Because race is so loaded for people that sometimes they're embarrassed to ask certain questions. And my role as a facilitator is to really hear them, not just hear their words, but to also hear their fears, to hear their apprehension, to hear where they're stuck, I think that's what makes my program so different and so effective. I always, when I get testimonials, I try to get people to talk about the seminar. And they end up talking about me. I'm like, it's not me, it's the seminar, you understand? But now I'm beginning to understand why they're confusing me with the seminar. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily because I created the seminar, but because what I'm realizing, even as I'm speaking to you now, is that I do this other thing in those seminars, which is really just open my heart and allow a frequency of love to be expansive in that space, which makes people feel safe. I've been a healer long enough to know that, one, I don't heal anybody. What I do is I give people information so they can quicken their own healing process, right? But also that people don't heal in a toxic environment. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's not true. People can heal in a toxic environment, but it's a lot harder for them to go through that process, right? Because you're not just healing, but then you're also almost fighting the environment because it's so toxic, which is what happens with race. Yeah. We live in a racially toxic environment. And, I always tell people the good news is if you learn to heal in that environment, you can heal anywhere. Because you've mastered the ability to heal in toxicity. The toxicity no longer has you have it. Right.
So you've been doing these seminars, the ones you've been talking about race and healing. And from what you're just describing, it sounds like you're using the same principles for that as you do for the sort of singing and healing that you were doing. Is that right? And does music that you're not necessarily singing now in the seminars, as I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're really using the same principles of song, singing, healing with the seminars that you're working on now.
Absolutely. So some of what I learned as I was studying and teaching sound therapy was that everything is vibration, including us. Vibration is sound. And our sound, everyone has their own individual sound. It's almost like your fingerprint.
Fingerprints, right?
Right, yeah. So you have your own individual sound, but that sound is made up of your genetics, the experiences you've had, the things that you choose to focus on, what you love, what you hate. Like that is what makes your personal individual frequency. Because we all live under the umbrella of a racial caste system, everyone has been racialized in one way or another. How you absorb the frequency of that racial caste system has to do with where you are in the racial caste system. So, for instance, just to keep it simple, we've all pretty much heard, the basics of the history of slavery, right?
Right.
So if I were to tell a story, if I were listening to a story about slavery, right, I would absorb that story differently from someone who was raised seeing themselves as a white person. The Native American person would hear that story based on being a Native American person.
Mm-hmm.
The person who has a history of living in countries that were colonized would hear that story through that colonization, through that perspective. As a result, we would each vibrate at different frequencies, even though we're hearing the same exact story. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. So it's part of the healing then, would be trying to shift your frequency or how does that, do you go from a frequency that's a little more tense or doesn't quite fit you? How does that work?
So if we were to look at it from the perspective of frequencies, while everyone's vibrating at different frequencies around the dysfunction, because it is a dysfunction, we also have common ground in being human, in loving the people in our lives,
mm-hmm.
in, we have common ground. In fact, we have more in common than we have.
Right.
And we spend a lot of time focused on the differences, right? But when you start to focus on the commonality, you start to think differently. But you need to understand it's twofold, right? So one is understanding the history that's created the current events and not detaching those. Because so for instance, human beings have lineage. They have lineage. First of all, we're all Africans, right? We've now traced the human race through the women of our human tribe.
Yep.
We've traced the entire human race to Africa. So we're all Africans, regardless of what color skin we have today. The reason we were able to do that genetic testing is because there's a continuum. There's a lineage that is unbroken in the human genetic chain.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, we all carry the information of that lineage. So, and historically, the lineage has been broken. Okay, by that I mean we have disconnected the bigger human history from the race history. Okay, so there are things that research is telling us today that we didn't know 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Right.
So we have a lot of information that can help us to connect the dots. So if people want to quicken their healing process, they need to become really good at connecting the dots. And it's not that hard. You just need the information of the past and look at it with wide open eyes and see how it's still repeating today. Because the reason we keep repeating it is because we're not willing to look back and own the good, the bad, and the ugly of the past, right? Yeah. We just want to own all the good things that we did in the past, when in reality, we also did a lot of things that were not good, you know? And if we can come to a place where we can accept both the shadow and the light, we can quicken the healing process. Because it's very difficult to heal a past that you're in denial of or that you're not willing to accept. We just keep repeating it if we do that.
Yeah, that is very interesting. You know, my one of the reasons I ended up in Washington, D.C. was because some ancestors who were down in Louisiana, one of them was appointed a senator and came up to D.C., but they had sugar plantation lands, and I know that they had slaves, and I love that line of the history, and I love the people I've met in my family from there. But it's that there was a past that, I mean, a lot of people in the United States and everywhere have these very difficult histories associated with race and subjugation and all sorts of things. My goodness, we're really fighting that. So I hear what you're saying, but how, you know, so it's kind of a music related conversation. Do you have ideas on how musicians, how non-musicians or others could use this music that we have, that, you know, that we are, to help us heal in all these other ways?
Yeah, I mean, music is one of the most healing things that we have on the planet. The reality is that one of the first experiences we have in utero is hearing the mother's heartbeat. Right. So rhythm is something that is natural to us. The oscillation of the mother's blood is something else that we also hear, which is melody. And so, you know, so we are naturally attuned to music, which is why we love music so much all over the world. And we call it the universal language, right, because that's one of the first experiences we have on the planet, is hearing all of these things that are going on inside of the mother's body and even our own bodies. So we are naturally attuned to music. And music can be used in a lot of different ways to teach and to learn. I know that a lot of what I understand about race and racism and all those kinds of things comes from understanding frequencies and force resonance and all of those kinds of things. Like, you know, for me, music and art were the foundation of the work that I do today. You know, I always tell the story about learning to draw an egg when I first went to high school and thinking, oh, this is ridiculous. This is so boring. Why am I drawing this egg? You know, yeah. And eventually you start to put the shadow around the egg and the egg starts to come to life. It becomes three-dimensional. So our unwillingness to face the truth about our past, the shadow side of our past, keeps us flat. It keeps us from becoming these amazing three-dimensional beings that we can be. It also, it's also not a good way to teach children, because when we don't tell the part of the story that is affiliated with our shadow, what we do is we make our children think that unless they're perfect, they don't have anything to offer. And that's not true.
Right, that's certainly not true.
Mm-hmm. So facing the shadow can help us in so many different ways, and it can really quicken the healing process.
Very cool. Milagros, you're such an interesting person. I love talking with you and hearing all this, and I know there's a lot more. You do have some ventures that you're working on, and you might, if you'd like to talk about that a little bit, or any other things that you think in the future for yourself, or even what you might suggest other people might focus on. You've given us a lot of good food for thought. But I think you're working on a TV show and some other things. You're going to keep doing it, right?
I'm surely going to keep doing it. Race Healer TV is a show that's near and dear to my heart, because that show is about giving. There are a lot of people in this country, people of all of the so-called races, because we know that there's no such thing, right? But we still use that language, and people of all races, of all ethnicities, who are doing amazing work to heal the racial divide. But they don't get any press. No one talks about them on the news. I mean, it's rare. Occasionally you'll get the hero so-and-so, and we don't make it a point to talk about these people who are doing this great work. And then there are the people who are thinking, I really hate this racism stuff. I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. And so I created this show to highlight the work that people are doing for a lot of reasons. One of them is because they don't get any press, right? And people need to know that they exist and that they're doing this work. But also because there are people looking for ideas of what they can do. And so this show gives people information that will hopefully lead to transformation. It encourages them to do something. I want people to know that they don't have to be perfect and they don't have to get it right, that it's important that they speak up and not stay silent. So the show is really about giving people the opportunity to learn something that they may or may not know about race, encouraging them to have conversations with the people around them. Because conversations changes the frequency, especially if it's a good, healthy conversation. It changes the frequency. But I also, so I do that, and I do a 2-day intensive. It's a seminar, and everyone that's been through that seminar, I've had a few thousand people go through that seminar, and they always say the same thing. It's like, you just never see race the same way again. First of all, there's so much information in that program that it literally takes people about 45 days to absorb all the learning that happens in those 2 days. It's really powerful. It's life transforming. It's called Race Demystified. And, so I do that work because I believe in people. I believe that when people get good information, they can make good decisions. I've seen it happen over and over and over again. So for me, this is my life's work. The music and the art were foundations that allowed me to see things through different eyes. And so I honor that, and I'm grateful to that. And because I had that kind of foundation that allows me to look at things through the perspective of shades, that allows me to look at things from the perspective of frequencies, that allows me to use my voice in a different way, I am thrilled to be doing this work. We're also creating a new magazine called Race Healer Magazine. It's an online magazine that people will have access to. And the shows are all being turned into podcasts. So for those who don't have time to watch the show, they can just pop it into their, when they're going to work and things like that, and listen to the show a podcast.
Well, that's awesome. So, and where will people find out about you and about these projects that you're doing?
So they can go to www.racehealertv.com, and they can learn about the show there. There's also information about me at milagrosphillips.com. And they also can find some things on the Facebook page, which is Race Healer TV is our Facebook page. They'll be able to see some of the trailers of the upcoming shows and just, see some things about the show. I mean, one of the things that I say to people is throughout time, we've always had race healers. And, and we know about the Gandhis and the Martin Luther Kings and we know about those people, but we also need to know who today is doing something to make a difference. And there are a lot of people out there.
A lot of people.
So hoping that people will watch the show, that they will also support the show so that we can keep it going and bring more and more information about the race healers that we have in our nation today. I wanted to share a poem that I wrote a long time ago. And I also want to share, maybe the first paragraph of something I wrote, which is part of the handout that I used to give my students in the 90s. And it's called The Body and Its Orchestration. Mm-hmm. But this particular poem was at the beginning of that handout. And it's called I Carry Within Me the Music of Time. Ah. Today I set forth with music of sublime creation. I allow it to sing before me, in me, and through me. Today I honor the song within. I hear the music of my soul, uninhibited and strong. Today I hear the universe serenading, this constant sound of joy, as it always has and it always will. Today I call, I chant, I croon. I hum, I speak, I sing with you. For I am the minstrel, canary, and siren. In my voice, hear the echo of resounding compositions. Hear the music of lifetimes, unique and divine. For I carry within me the music of time. So I wrote that.
Wow, that's great.
Thank
That's really
you.
great.
Thank you. I wrote that because I wanted to connect just the words and the rhythm to the work that we were doing. And the introduction to the program was something I wrote called The Body and Its Orchestration. And I'll just read a little bit because I don't want to bore your listeners. But
it's fascinating.
So this is the body and its orchestration. All that we perceive in the physical world is vibration, and vibration is sound. The constant waves of matter vibrating in our physical world are the sound that makes up our environment. Our thoughts are sound. The very air we breathe is alive with this phenomenon called sound. Most of the sound is inaudible. Nevertheless, sound exists. And the human body absorbs it in more than one way. The body is a finely tuned orchestra with every organ adjusted to specific frequencies. These frequencies give each individual their own unique sound. Although the body contains many pitches and tones, it plays as one perfectly tuned orchestra. Throw one organ out of tune, and you'll find the whole orchestra begins to play off key.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, Milagros, thank you so much for taking the time for sharing this information with us. I find it very inspiring and fascinating, and people can check it out, and just really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff.
You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.